Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're speaking on the eve of the visit of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Toulouse, where there was that horrible shooting spree back in March that claimed the lives of 7, including 3 Jewish school children and a rabbi. With us to talk about it from Toulouse, Nicole Yardeni of the CRIF, the Council for Jewish Institutions in France. Also joining us now, Paris attorney Tony Kennebrew. Paris traffic on Halloween could not keep him away. Tony Kennebrew, who lives in the Parisian working-class suburb of Le Blanc-Ménil, where you volunteer with disadvantaged youths there.
Exactly.
Also with us, France 24's Sylvain Attal, who, among his many credits, is authoring a book back in 2003 published in French called The New AntiSemitism. Sylvain, Netanyahu going to Toulouse on Thursday, is that the main reason for this visit?
Yeah, I think it's the main reason for this visit, but also the fact that Hollande met already with Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority leader, twice, and it's his first meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. But the thing that struck me today is that both men clearly wanted to show a very warm climate between France and Israel. And that's a shift because, bizarrely, the relationship between Netanyahu and Sarkozy was terrible, was at the end of Sarkozy's term. And it's strange because...
So the conservative Netanyahu getting along better with the socialist Hollande.
Yeah, and if you remember that Sarkozy was elected like and praised like a very good friend of Israel and the Israeli public pretty much emphasizing that Sarkozy's grandfather was Jewish, etc., etc. And I think that among French voters in Israel, he's done in 2007 more than 85% of the votes. But at the end, remember that this reflection of Sarkozy on wire, but was supposed to be off the record with Barack Obama in a G20, telling Barack Obama, "Oh, I understand you. I can't stand this guy anymore." You remember that? It means that the relationship was terrible at the end. And why? In my opinion, it's because Sarkozy, after what he's done in Georgia, for example, merging the Russian with the Georgian and helping negotiate...
Broker the peace deal.
Broker the peace deal. Decided it was going to be the broker of the Israeli-Palestinian peace. So it was, of course, to
So today there were jokes about it, but you could tell François Hollande was paying lip service to it. He was really didn't know.
Yeah, the difference between Sarkozy and Hollande clearly is that Sarkozy decided that he was able to broker the peace between Israeli and Palestinian, and for that he needed some gestures from the Israelis, and he believed that just because he was seen as this terrible friend of Israel, Netanyahu was going to give him almost everything he wanted. But no, that's not like things working. And Hollande, the difference with Hollande is much more realistic. Hollande doesn't imagine, even in his dreams, that he's going to be the peace broker, because he knows perfectly that there's no chance to broker a deal in the 10 next years. So he's very easy with that. So he's not even trying to get something from Netanyahu, who is very hardline on the Palestinian. But what struck me today is that, for example, even on the settlement policy, which was the bone of contention between France and Israel.
Which Hollande denounced.
Yeah, he's denouncing it, but in a very soft manner. He said, yeah, we have a disagreement on settlement policy, of course, but he's not really emphasizing on this question. And that means that Netanyahu and Hollande were getting very well together today. And for me, that's new.
All right, most of the questions during Wednesday's press conference in Paris were about Iran, Syria, Palestinian statehood, as Sylvain was mentioning. But the issue of rising anti-Semitism in France did also come up.
It's a new kind of anti-Semitism. It comes from new quarters, very violent quarters. And I think that there is a recognition that this doesn't merely threaten the Jews of France, but it threatens everyone in France and everyone else in Europe and across a very broad radius. So there is that determination. At the same time, I, as the Prime Minister of Israel, always proclaim to Jews everywhere to come to the Jewish state and to make it their home. And there's no contradiction between the two.
Benjamin Netanyahu says he welcomes the Jews of France who want to move to Israel, and I understand him. But the right of these people, these French citizens, if they decide to do so, is to be in France, to work in France, to live in France with the condition that they are able to live their lives to the full. and be completely safe, and that is my duty.
Ça, c'est mon devoir.
Nicole Yardeni, what's your reaction to Benjamin Netanyahu's invitation to come to Israel if things aren't working out here?
I think Israel has been created for that very reason, that if anti-Semitism becomes impossible, it's a haven for Jews. And I can quote my husband. My husband says, the next to last worst nightmare of a Jew is that he has to leave a country like France, or a country like England, or, I mean, basically a country with democracies there, because that means that democracy will not be there. But the worst nightmare of a Jew is that there will be no Israel to go to. So if I can extend my, on that line, Israel is the haven that we have to go to, it's true, when there is absolutely no possibility for us to live in a country where democratic values assure us of the safety as citizens of that country. At the same time, going to Israel is a personal choice, and every year there's about 2,000 French Jews that leave to go to Israel. But I think it's a really a personal choice at this point. It is true.
Is it sometimes, though, fodder for anti-Semites who, harking back again all the way back to the Dreyfus affair, say that, you know, well, Jews, they have split loyalties, they're not really French?
Yes, the old accusation of having split loyalty. That's, you know, that's what, I remember in Germany they used to say that a Jew can never be a German, you would have to cut his head and put a German head on his body. So I think that in France particularly, but in all our countries, you know, Anglo-Saxon countries as well, a lot of people have dual citizenships, they come from different countries, they have different cultures, and I think that's a richness. I don't think that being Jewish and belonging to the Jewish people makes me any less French than someone that just came from Spain in 1936. In the south of France, we have a lot of them because they escaped Franco and still listen to Spanish TV and speak Spanish at home and care for flamenco. So I think I'm just as French. What I care about, and that's what the Prime Minister of Israel said, is that the risk is for democracy in general. And we have to fight for democracy, and we have to fight together, not only French Jews, but all the French, and basically all the citizens of democratic countries, because the risk comes from ideology as it has come before in the 20th century from fascism, Nazism, or communism. So I think the fight is a fight for those kind of values of democracy, freedom, and that's a fight for everybody. And right now we are under some form of threat from radical Islam.
From radical Islam is the threat?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Let's pick up on that point. There has been a spike of anti-Semitic acts that were noted. The spike coming after the Mohammed Merah shooting spree. And in a recent interview with The Atlantic, the Nobel Prize-winning author Elie Wiesel picked up on that survey and said when he lived in Paris just after the war, anti-Semitism there didn't exist. An estimated 1 in 4 of France's Jews perished in the Holocaust under the complicity of the French Vichy government. Wiesel thinks that in the years immediately after, the wound was still open. As a result, it wasn't nice to be an anti-Semite. It wasn't fashionable or elegant. Tony Kennebrew, in your community where you are, is there a lot of anti-Semitism?
There is quite a lot of anti-Semitism, unfortunately. I try to inform many of the youth and the Muslim community in the Paris suburbs that Israel, for example, is a democratic country. That Jews are people that are people like you and me. Like Shakespeare says, you know, does a Jew have tickle? You know, when you tickle a Jew, he'll laugh. When you pinch a Jew, etc. there's a lot of anti-Semitism.
Do you know who Shakespeare is?
Yes, Shakespeare said that, right.
Yeah, but the people you talk to of Shakespeare, do they know who's Shakespeare?
Well, I think they know who Shakespeare is, but the problem is that most of them, I think this education, I believe, comes from most their parents or from their culture. Many of the Muslims that I meet, many of them even say that to be a Muslim you have to hate Jews, and I tell them that's not a part of being a Muslim. I'm not at all a Muslim. I grew up in a Christian environment, and I also had a very Jewish education. However, when I go to cities, when I go to cities outside of Paris, and anywhere in France, and when I talk with the Muslim community, I try to let them know that their way of thinking. Well, not all the Muslims that think this way, but the ones that are anti-Semitic. I try to let them know that Israel is a democratic country, that that the Prophet Muhammad, one of his neighbors, was a Jewish person, and that the Prophet Muhammad said that one should respect everybody. It's all about tolerance and accepting everybody. You should accept this. Unfortunately, this isn't what I see. There is a rise of anti-Semitism. There's also there are also these youth who, in front of you, would say that they're not against Jews, but when you talk to them personally, or when they're with a group, they tend to say all sorts of anti-Semitic things. I went to several places and outside of Paris where they would say, "Are you Jewish? Why are you protecting the Jew? You come to my apartment. I have the Israeli flag in my living room, next to the Algerian flag and next to the Moroccan flag." And when someone would come into my living room, they say, "Hey, what are you doing with this flag?" I say, "Well, Israel is a democratic country." I think the education has to change. The education has to change also in the countries where of origins. For example, the education has to change inside Morocco. The education has to change inside Algeria. It has to change inside Tunisia. This has to change. And also, I was listening to the conversation earlier. It's important that the leaders of the Muslim community have a strong stance against these anti-Semitic actions.
Which, in fairness, after the attack on that kosher grocery store that you mentioned, there were statements from the
There were
Muslim.
statements, but they were timid.
Yeah, I agree with you. The key point here is education.
Sure,
of course. What I would like to say, for example, I would like to say, and maybe it's going to shock Nicole Yardeni. I think that, of course, there's a great danger of Islamic radicalization, but to a certain extent, there's also Jewish radicalization. It's not voluntarily radicalization. It's not violent radicalization, but there's a kind of radicalization. As you remind, my book was published in 2003. When I was investigating for my book, at that time there were stories of pupils in the public educational sector, victims of anti-Semitic slur, or they were persecuted in the system, and they were forced to leave the system, and their parents put them on Jewish schools, for example. They had no choice anymore to take them out of the system and put them in the Jewish schools. And now, 10 years later, Mohammed Merah is killing innocent Jewish children outside a Jewish school. So there's a kind of panic in the Jewish community here in France that the next step, what's the next step? Of course, the next step is going to Israel, because if you're not safe in the public sector, if you're not safe anymore going to a public school or wearing a yarmulke in the street, for example, in France,
I agree.
What are you going to do?
I agree, but
there's no escape.
Right.
You're going to Israel.
But there shouldn't be this cycles created also, because not all the Muslims are like.
And let me just ask Nicole Yardeni and pick up on a point on the point that she mentioned. About the danger of radical Islam for the Jewish community in France. Is there not also a danger from the traditional French far right in the past, the leader of the far right talked about the Christian values of France. Now the new leader, his daughter, Marine Le Pen, talks about the secular notions of France and puts basically in the same basket all religious symbols, be they Jewish or Muslim.
Okay, as the member of the CAIF, of course, as you know, we don't discuss we don't talk to the far right, and therefore I'm not going to discuss whatever Marine Le Pen can say or not say, because we really are not interested in speaking to anybody that's either on the far right, on the far left, or radicalized in any way. We talk to moderates. And as long as people are moderates, we can discuss those issues. What's the point of being, I find that the political discourse in general is too radical. Sylvain Attal was saying that the Jews are becoming radical in a certain way as well. I think, unfortunately, our societies are becoming too radical. It's yes or no. You have to answer. Right now, I'm having a lot of time to answer, but it's very rare. We're supposed to give 20-second answers, and the more radical they are, the more they're going to go around and have some buzz. And same thing for politicians. So in order to have a good conversation, you can only have a good conversation with time, with people that are moderate,
educated,
people that are willing to listen. And that's why I cannot discuss outrageous commentaries from Marine Le Pen or from anybody else, either anti-Zionist on the far left or Muslims that think that the whole world has to become Wahhabis. So it's not interesting. That's not what we're about. What we have to do together is being able to see what's threatening us, being able to allow youth to have a better education, like you said, but especially to have the capacity to have that moderation. And that's not what we are seeing in our society, and I regret it very much.
All right.
All discourses tend to radicalize.
You're right.
You're right.
And before we go, we mentioned
kinds.
it. We mentioned it at the outset. It's not just Jews that are made to feel unwelcome these days. There's been a lot of controversy over the front cover this Wednesday of news magazine Le Point. This shameless Islam is the heading, with the subheading: hospitals, schools, lunches, pools, skirts, school curriculums. The article picks up on a survey for conservative daily Le Figaro, which finds that 60% of the French feel Islam is too present, and a growing number favor the ban on the Islamic headscarf. As you can see, this feeling of polarization characterized there in that survey. That's where we're going to leave it, but I want to thank all of our guests for joining us. Nicole Yardeni in Toulouse, Tony Kennebrew and Sylvain Attal, thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.